I'm going to be reading a scary story. I never liked the crawl space in my house. It's dark and full of spiders, smelling of mildew and rotting wood. The ceiling is low and it makes me feel claustrophobic whenever I go down there. I don't know what it is about it specifically, but every time I open the door under the stairs to hastily shove some box inside, it feels like there are eyes watching me. Usually I don't go past the first few feet, and if I do, I hurry back out quickly, feeling my spine tingling with fear, hearing things moving in the shadows. I find myself rushing out of there too fast for my own good. I've hit my head on the low doorway leading out more than once, forgetting to duck. The house is a backsplit, so the crawl space is really big. It's the same square footage as any other floor. The only difference is you have to bend down to go inside, since the ceiling is just a few feet high. Yesterday I had to call a cable guy to come over to hook up a line to my bedroom. The man said he had to go down to the basement to see the connections. He took a quick look at everything and told me the fastest option would be to run a line through the crawl space, then fish a line up the wall from the east end of the house where the bedroom was located. I told him to go ahead since he seemed to know what he was doing. Then I went back upstairs to work on my laptop, hoping his fiddling with the connections would be minimal so I could stay online. After a while I heard his drill and figured that meant he was starting his work. I put my headphones on for a Zoom meeting and let him do what he had to do. I'd never been the type to watch service people over their shoulder when they're doing a job. The meeting went longer than I expected and I forgot about the table guy, until I got upstairs and saw he hadn't finished the job like he was supposed to. There was a hole in the wall, but no cable, and no box. I went down to the basement and looked around for the guy, but he was nowhere to be found. Peeking my head into the dark crawl space, I tried to see if he was still in there, fishing the cable line. I called out his name, but there was no response. Still, I got that feeling like someone was watching me from the crawl space. Hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I tried to ignore that sensation, but it was difficult. He must have knocked off early, I thought to myself. It was late in the evening, after all. Maybe he would come back to finish tomorrow. That's when I remembered I had his number, so I could easily text him and ask what had happened. I thought about calling, but this just seemed easier. Hey, I'm the customer at the house on Everest. Are you coming back to finish the job? I didn't hear you leave. I was on a Zoom call. After waiting for a while for a response, I gave up on the guy, thinking he had turned his phone off for the evening. I went back to my office and continued on a project I had been caught up in. My work went on late into the night, and it was about 3 a.m. by the time I finally finished up and went to bed. As I walked towards the bedroom, I thought I heard a sound from below the floorboards, like someone's fingernails dragging across the floor. Like someone trying to grab hold of something, anything, to stop from being dragged deeper into the shadows. No! Let's not think of those things before bed. I ignored the sounds and got in beneath the covers, pulling in my earplugs so I wouldn't hear them anymore. It was just a raccoon or a squirrel, I told myself. Not a cable guy being murdered or buried alive. Closing my eyes, I tried to think of anything else but failed. Eventually I drifted into sleep. My dreams were uneasy and full of vivid nightmares, each one more terrifying than the last. And yet when I woke up I couldn't remember a thing. I was making breakfast when I heard the sound again. It was coming from beneath me, in the crawl space. I procrastinated for a few minutes before settling on what to do. Then I put on my jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, boots, and a pair of thick gloves. I dug out an old dog crate into which I had corralled the pest making the noise. Money didn't grow on trees, and I'd already spent a fortune on the cable installation fees. This would have to be a DIY effort. I went down to the basement and took a long look at the door leading into the crawl space. My hands were shaking and my breath was coming fast and ragged as I thought about going in there. The scratching, dirt-turning noise came again, louder this time, and I steadied myself. Then I reached for the doorknob and turned it. Suddenly the sounds from within the crawl space stopped. Whatever it was, it sounded briefly like a shuffling movement, like something crawling along on the ground, digging claws into the loose dirt. Hello? There was no answer. There was a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling about 8 feet in. It was one of those simple fixtures attached to a chain which you pull on to make the light come on. It looked so close. I took a deep breath and exhaled steam, indicating the crawl space was for some reason much colder than the rest of the house. That should have been a clue, but I didn't think about it until later. Ducking my head down, I told myself to stop being so nervous. That spine-tingling sensation returned as I felt eyes on the back of my neck again. Trying to ignore it, I rushed those final few steps towards the light bulb. All of my instincts were telling me to run now, as if something were creeping up behind me in the darkness, but I tried to ignore that sickening feeling. I reached my hand out desperately, groping for the chain to illuminate the darkness, but I couldn't find it at first. The room was pitch black. Looking back, I saw the door was creaking shut behind me, as if blown by a strong wind, but it had never done that before. It slammed closed suddenly, making a loud noise and causing me to jump, hitting my head on the ceiling. Ah! Damn it! Ow! Finally, my hand caught hold of the chain and I pulled it down. The light came on brightly, blinding me for a second. But then an instant later, the bulb burst, the hot glass shattering everywhere and bouncing off my closed eyelids as I flinched. When I opened my eyes, I saw the crawl space was drenched in darkness once again. There was the sound of movement again, this time from near the door behind me where I had entered. It sounded big, and I realized suddenly that this was not a raccoon or a squirrel I was dealing with. This was a person down in the crawl space. With me. A silhouette moved in the darkness, ducking behind a pillar and out of sight. Whatever it was, it moved like an animal, but it was the shape and size of a human being, crawling on all fours like the girl from The Ring and moving straight towards me now. My phone was in my pocket, the only light source I could think of, so I took it out quickly and turned the flashlight function on. Just as the light was about to hit the thing, it scuttled behind a pillar and out of sight, but I caught a momentary glimpse of a horrifying feminine face, black eyes, and a mouth full of rotten teeth. Immediately the phone began to alert me of a low battery. Of course, the one time I forgot to charge the damn thing. My heart was pounding now after seeing what I was up against. Not a rat or a squirrel, but a thing with pale skin and long black hair obscuring its features, malnourished, emaciated, and with the vague look of a young girl moving crab-like through the shadows. At least that's what my mind was telling me I had seen. I scurried further into the crawl space, away from that thing, terrified as I heard the sound of it moving constantly closer. It was impossible to see where it was in the shadows, but I made out a silhouette of something hunched over, occasionally crawling on all fours, ducking behind boxes and pillars to keep out of sight. It moved quickly with jerky, rapid strides, much faster than any human being. There was a wall coming up, I realized. I didn't have much more space to maneuver. The thing was closing in on me and I had to come up with a plan. But before I could think of anything, I tripped over a lumpy pile. I thought it was a bunch of clothes at first until I looked down and saw more details in the light of my phone. It was the cable guy. His face was slack and his jaw hung down. A puddle of blood was leaking from his mouth and several dozen stab wounds could be seen on his chest and abdomen. A large drill was clutched in his hands as if someone had snuck up on him while he was working. The cordless drill had a massive drill bit attached to it, at least 2 feet long. I picked it up and tested the trigger. It whirred to life, making a loud noise. "Step any closer and I'll drill your face!" I screamed to the thing in the crawl space. The scurrying sounds kept coming, drawing nearer and nearer, until eventually I could hear movement from right behind me. I felt a cold hand grip my ankle and squeeze. I screamed, pulling away with every ounce of strength I had, but the creature was strong. Its grip on my ankle was like a vice, and I thrashed and struggled to get away. I kicked it in the face again and again, hearing teeth breaking and bones cracking, until eventually the thing relented and released me. Jumping up, I banged my head hard on the ceiling again, hard enough to draw blood this time as it caught on a loose, rusty nail. Yelping in pain, I crawled away as fast as I could, dropping the drill on the ground, and then running out of there with my head ducked down in a low, shuffling gait. When I got out of the crawl space, I slammed the small door shut behind me, expecting something to come and start banging and scratching just at the moment I did. But instead there was silence, as if I had just imagined it all, but I know what I saw. Racing up the stairs, I dialed 911 on my phone, but then was surprised to see flashing lights outside already. As it turned out, my neighbors had heard my screams and had called the police. Not something you can count on every neighbor to do. I ran outside and told the cops what had happened. My story was met with a few dubious looks, especially when I told them about the creepy girl and the dead cable guy, but they said they would take a look. Feeling worried for their safety, I begged them to be careful. Bring lots of backup. Whatever that girl is, she's straight from hell. Their eyes were concerned, and I overheard one officer whispering something to another. Looks like we got another 1515. I was ushered into the back of a police car to wait for word from inside. A few minutes later they came back out. They were shaking their heads, looking at me with anger. And the cable guy was with them, bleeding from his abdomen and clutching his wounds. They pulled me out of the back of the car, and I saw the cable technician's eyes flash black as coal for a moment. Then he snuck me a smile. But his face went back to a look of outrage again. Yep, there's the son of a bitch who tried to kill me. Down the crawl space just now, and there's a dead little girl down there too. You just look around, you'll find her. Oh my God, who knows? There might be more of them down there for all I know. I felt sick to my stomach, dizzy and detached, like I was in a dream, wide awake. Got nothing to say for yourself? Read him his rights first. We don't want anything to hurt our chances of nailing this freak. They put me in handcuffs, and I listened as they recited the words I'd heard 1,000 times on movies and TV shows, but never thought I'd hear for myself in real life. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you can say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I'm up for a murder charge now. At least I get computer time once a week, though. It's allowed me to do some research, and I'm finding out all sorts of things about my assailant. Maybe I can convince the judge that what happened to me is real. Looks like I'm not the only one who's experienced these sorts of events. If you've seen anything like this recently, please tell me so I know I'm not alone. So the police and the courts know this is real. I didn't kill that girl. I did not attack that cable guy. He's possessed by the same thing that was inside of her. Hopefully I can prove it before I get the death penalty.